Hello, welcome to my channel, Beautiful Minutia. If you're new here, my name is Tiffany, and today we are doing a mid-month wrap-up for the month of May. One of my neighbors is mowing their lawn, so hopefully that's not coming off in the audio, but now's the time I have to film, so we're doing it now. So for the month of May, I am participating in Mood Reading May with Becca from Hicks Picks Books. So I have just been mood reading. I didn't have a specific TBR. There were only two books that I needed to read this month, one being a buddy read and one was for a read-along of Mere Christianity that Krista over at Books and Jams is hosting. But other than that, I have just been reading whatever I want to, which has been really nice. It's actually been a really great reading month so far. I have already had 3 5-star books, which is so not normal for me this year. I think I had one other month, maybe March, that I had a lot of 5-star books, but typically so far a lot of my months have been kind of like a lot of 3-star books and just kind of meh reading month. So I was really excited to have such a great kickoff to my reading month. So far I have read 8 books, which sounds like a lot, but 3 of those books were carryovers from last month. In fact, one of them I was almost done with when the month started. So that one doesn't even really almost count, but I am counting it because I finished it this month. And then 5 of those books were audiobooks. So as most of you probably know, we are moving. At the point that this video comes out, it will be 2 weeks out from our move. So I have been listening to a lot of audiobooks to help me like pass the time while I'm packing, which has been really fun. Plus we went to Kentucky to paint, so we listened to some audiobooks while we were road tripping too. So yeah, so I have listened to a lot of audiobooks this month. Otherwise, I wouldn't have gotten hardly any books read. So some of these books I did talk about kind of more at length in my reading vlog that I did the week we went to Kentucky to paint, actually. So I'll link that in the cards and down in the description below, so that way if you want to hear more in-depth thoughts, I'm not going to give those in this video just because I've already talked about them a lot. So the first book I completed this month was All Things Wise and Wonderful by James Herriot, and if you've been around here for very long, you know that I am a huge James Herriot fan. I am a big animal person and I love science, so I really have enjoyed every single one of his books. This is book 3 in the series, and in this one he has been drafted into the Royal Air Force in World War II. So we're kind of flipping back and forth between his time in the Air Force and memories of him at home being a vet. And most chapters begin with him saying, oh, this thing happened while I was, training, and it reminded me of this. But there are some Air Force stories sprinkled in, but it's mostly vet stories like his other books. And this was a 5-star book, which was no surprise because I have loved every single James Herriot book with all my heart. So the next book that I finished this month was an audiobook. I did start this audiobook in April, but it was like towards the end of April, and it's The Wednesday Wars by Gary Schmidt. And Gary Schmidt is an author that I put out a video talking about authors that I'd like to try, and he was on it. And so I listened to The Wednesday Wars. Chantel at An Intentional Life really recommended the audiobook for this, so I was really excited to listen to it. And this was another 5-star book. I absolutely loved it. So we follow Holling Hood, which is just the funniest name. He is a 7th grade, I think, boy. And this takes place, I don't remember exactly what year, but it is during the Vietnam War. And also like Martin Luther King Jr. and Bobby Kennedy's assassination happened during this school year. So there's a lot of political and racial tensions and things going on in the story, but it's handled in such a age-appropriate way, with lots of humor and lots of good stuff too. So Holling starts his school year and he is convinced that his teacher, Mrs. Baker, absolutely hates him. And as the year progresses, we just see how much she pours into him and all the things that she has done for him. And we really just see Holling grow up over the school year. And so, yeah, it was just really enjoyable. I felt like it handled a lot of issues really, really well and sensitively, and it made me laugh out loud a ton, and so I really enjoyed this. Would it have been a 5-star book if it wasn't in audio? I'm not sure. I feel like it probably still would have, because it's a very solid book, but definitely like the audiobook is unbelievable and I really enjoyed it. The next book that I finished this month is Binti by, well, I'm not really sure how you pronounce her name. Nendi Okorafor? I don't know how. I'm butchering it big time, I'm sure. So this is about a girl, Binti, and she gets accepted into this exclusive university in outer space, which is actually like on its own planet. And so she decides to go. She's part of the Himba tribe in Namibia, which is an actual tribe. So it's really cool. There's a lot of stuff in there that relates to that tribe specifically, which is super cool. I really liked that a lot, and the author is Namibian herself, so that's really neat. This is a sci-fi, and typically I have a really hard time connecting with sci-fi. I think a lot of the sciencey stuff kind of like goes too far and goes over my head, and I just end up confused and trying so hard to figure out the scientific stuff that I don't connect with the characters as much. But I really did connect with Binti, and I really liked her, and I liked the plotline in general. But this did end up being a 4-star book for me, because there was something at the end that I felt like wasn't resolved well, and this is the first book in a trilogy. The other books are longer. This is a novella, and it's only, I think, 90 pages or something like that. So maybe it's mentioned in the other books, but the way it's wrapped up makes me think that it probably isn't. So I did drop a star for that, but this is actually the most engaged I've ever been with a sci-fi in recent days, so I really enjoyed it. The next book that I finished was another audiobook, and that is Ella Enchanted by Gail Carson Levine, and this was really fun. So my daughter and I actually started this book in April when we went to go visit my parents, and then we finished it on our way to Kentucky. So this is a Cinderella fairy tale retelling about a girl named Ella. And when she's born, there's like a fairy that comes to her birth and gives her the gift of obedience, which means that she has to obey every order that anyone ever gives her. So she spends her time in this book mostly trying to find a way to break this curse, but in the process she falls in love, and there's all kinds of other things that are very reminiscent of the Cinderella story that take place, and I felt like it made more sense than the original fairy tale in terms of the romance. And I'm pretty picky about romances, but I was pretty invested in this one. I thought it was really sweet and I really enjoyed it a lot. I did like the audiobook, but the thing that I thought was strange is when the book starts, like, Ella is younger, but then by the time the book ends, I think she's like 15 or 16, and it's like this little child narrating the whole time. And that made the romantic stuff seem kind of weird, because it sounds like this child can't be older than like 10. So I actually might have enjoyed this book even more if I had read it physically, which I do have a physical copy, so I probably will reread it at some point. But even with the audiobook being narrated by a younger narrator, it was still 5 stars. Claire and I both absolutely loved it. The next book that I finished was also an audiobook, and it's The Shape of Mercy by Susan Meisner. This was my first Susan Meisner, and I did not have a wonderful experience with this book. I talk about it a little more in depth in my vlog that I did, but I didn't rate it because I wanted to let it kind of sit with me for a little while before I rated it. So it is about a college student who is transcribing an old diary by a girl who was about her age when the Salem witch trials took place. She ends up being accused of witchcraft and tried. And that's not a spoiler because you know that from the beginning as she's transcribing this diary. So I did not feel very connected to any of the characters in modern day. I thought that they were really bland, and I I thought Mercy's story was really interesting, but the way Mercy's story resolved, I found highly problematic. I did post a very spoilery review on my Goodreads, and my Goodreads account is linked in the description if you want to go check it out. But I thought that it glorified an action that someone took and romanticized something that I thought was incredibly problematic in general, but even more problematic for someone who claims to be a Christian author. And there were some Christian themes in this book, but it didn't feel like, I don't know, there's some authors that you read and it's like very heavy-handedly Christian, and I did not feel like this one was. But I don't know. Yeah. So my engagement with the book as a whole was probably like a 2.5, 3 stars. And then this ending element was so problematic to me that I dropped it to 1 star, because the more that I thought about it, the more upset it made me. And I have a history with like the event that happens. And so I think that maybe that affected me that much more than maybe it wouldn't have if I didn't have a history with that. So anyways, this is really vague. I'm sorry. I don't want to give spoilers, especially in a wrap-up. I hate giving spoilers in wrap-ups. So yeah, if you want to spoil yourself, then you can go ahead and read my Goodreads review. The next book that I read was another audiobook. I know you're so shocked. And it's the 3rd book of the Wollstonecraft Detective Agency, and it's called The Case of the Counterfeit Criminals. And it was okay. Like, it was still really cute. I loved the first 2 books. I think the second book's my favorite. But I loved both of them, and I love the audiobook because I love all the accents, the British accents and everything, and it's really fun to listen to. I feel like it is excellently narrated. But I just felt like I didn't connect with the storyline of this one quite as much. It didn't suck me in as much, and I think part of the reason is that the first 2 books are kind of based on some Wilkie Collins mystery books that I particularly really love, and I don't know if this one is based on a classic mystery, and if it is, it's one that I haven't read. So maybe it's because I didn't have that same connection there. I'm not really sure, but it was a 3-star book because I did enjoy listening to it. It just didn't grab me as much as the other ones. The next book that I finished is my buddy read for the month, and that's I Capture the Castle by Dodie Smith. I buddy read this with Shalise over at And Read Another Chapter. And this was a really fun one to discuss because we were kind of like guessing some things going on, and yeah, we totally called it. But anyways, this is the story of Cassandra and her family. So they're pretty poor. Her father was a very famous writer that wrote something that was like worldwide fame and was kind of a precursor to like James Joyce. And then he's kind of like fallen off, and so the family has fallen into poverty, and they live in a crumbling ancient castle, which is really interesting. So Cassandra is 17, and this follows her journal that she's writing for like 6 months. And so it follows her and her family. She lives with her father, her stepmother, her younger brother, older sister, and then like this boy that is like their servant or whatever. And so the first half of the book, I absolutely just really connected with her so much, and I loved her descriptions, and it was just sweet and fun to read. And then about halfway during the book, there is a drastic like tonal shift, which made the book kind of bittersweet, because there's a lot of unrequited love for many people in this book, which made it kind of sad to read in some ways, but I still really enjoyed even like the parts that were not as cheery and upbeat. And I felt like by the time we reach the end of the book, we can see huge character growth from Cassandra, from where she started as kind of like this naive child basically who doesn't really know much about the ways of the world to this person who has now fallen in love and experienced her first love and seen firsthand the effects of greed and selfishness and things like that. And so yeah, I really enjoyed this book. I did just finish it, so it's kind of hard for me to give a rating to it. I would say it's in the 4 to 5 star range, but I'm not totally sure where I've landed on that yet. There are some books that I like have to take time to think about how I really feel about them, and then over the course of a few days or a week, I kind of can put a better star rating on it. But it's definitely at least 4 stars. I really enjoyed it despite its bittersweetness. And the last book that I have finished so far this month is The Tale of Hilltop Farm. I don't remember who it's by. It's gonna be on the book cover here. So this is an interesting book. It's a cozy mystery, and it was recommended by Kate Howe, and I am so glad she recommended it because I thought that this was so much fun. So it is about Beatrix Potter, who she buys this farm in this town, and she comes to check it out and live there after she has purchased it. And there's been someone who kind of like mysteriously died, and there are things that are going missing in the town, and so people are just kind of trying to figure out what is going on. At the same time, people are trying to figure out what's going on. Their animals are part of the dynamic too, mostly cats and dogs, but there are also some of Beatrix Potter's animals. She had like some rabbits and a mouse and a hedgehog, and they're trying to figure out the mystery too. So they can talk, which talking animals isn't necessarily always like my jam when it comes to like adult stories, but I really liked this. So the animals are like talking to each other, and they try to communicate with the humans, but the humans don't know what they're saying. But I just I loved Beatrix Potter growing up, and I still love her. Like I bought her entire collection of children's books before my daughter was born. Way before, years before she was born, because I was like, I want her to grow up with Beatrix Potter and love her too. And so there's such nostalgia in this book for me, because there are animals, like there's a cat named Tabitha Twitchit, and there's the mouse Tom Thumb, and like his wife Hunca Munca, which is I think The Tale of Two Bad Mice, which is one of my favorite Beatrix Potters. And Peter Rabbit is referenced, and so you've got all these different like classic Beatrix Potter tales that are interwoven in there, along with the process of her writing, because she's trying to write Jeremy Fisher, which is about a frog, while she's there too, and she's grappling with like the loss of her fiance, and there's just all these different elements in it that I felt were super well done. The mystery itself was nothing like super earth-shattering, but in cozy mysteries, it rarely is. In fact, I find cozy mysteries to oftentimes be quite cheesy, and sometimes it's hard for me to find ones where the cheese level is at an acceptable level for me. Sometimes I'm just like, all right, I just can't get past it. But I really loved this one, and I don't know if I would have loved it as much if I had read it physically, because again, this is one where the narrator was just excellent, and you've got British accents everywhere, and some of the characters have more Scottish accents, and so she's just got different accents that she's interweaving. And that just made it so entertaining to listen to. I listened to pretty much the entirety of it over the course of like, I think like 2 days while I packed my daughter's room, and it was just so lovely. And I think that it's one that I know it's one that I could listen to with my daughter, because there's no language, there's nothing objectionable to it at all. Just a sweet little story. And I mean, if you didn't like Beatrix Potter growing up, or you're not really familiar with her, you probably won't like it as much as I did, but I did. I gave it 4 stars. I thought it was just loads of fun. So there are the 8 books that I completed this month. I am still reading Mere Christianity. about that far in it. And then I am also reading The Mark of the Raven, and I'm about like 100 pages in, so I'm not that far into it. I was kind of prioritizing I Capture the Castle because I was really enjoying reading that and really invested in finding out what was gonna happen. So I need to get a little bit more back into this one, and I'm hoping to read Legendborn soon too, because I get the feeling that that one's gonna be due back at the library pretty soon. So there you have it. Those are the books that I have read this month. I would love it if you would comment down below and tell me what you have been reading, especially if you have had any 5-star books so far this month. But even if they haven't been 5 stars, I'd still love to hear what you have been reading. If you like this video, please hit like and also subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again next time.